Hi everyone, welcome to Backchat. Welcome to Yoga Berry, your yoga for scoliosis community. So if you are here live, I can see there's 5 of you at least already tuning in. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to, maybe it's your first time, right? Maybe you're just kind of checking out and wanting to see what's going on here. But maybe you have attended before, so you kind of know what to expect, and I still appreciate you very, very much. So make sure that you, unless you're driving, of course, otherwise, if you want to use the chat box and leave us a comment throughout our conversation as well, and already hinting, I've got an interview guest today. So feel free to let us know, of course, if you've got any questions. Let us know, as always, if you can hear me okay as well, because that has happened in the past that I've been talking and realized about 5 minutes in that it wasn't actually working. But we've tested everything from our side here before, and it seems to be okay. So we've had a little bit of a break here with Backchat because I've been away. I've been in Germany to see my family. I've been teaching at a yoga retreat in Spain, and our last conversation we had was with Dr. Lauren Fishman. So if you haven't listened to that yet, make sure that you do check this out. But today, I've got a lovely guest here. Her name is Brenda Carey, and she is a yoga teacher. She's also a Reiki Master. So she's going to give us a different perspective yet again, and this is really what I feel this show is all about. That I want to be able to share what we know, what we have learned about scoliosis on our different journeys, and all of our journeys are completely different, and give you all the information and helping you hopefully to kind of to find your way, to find your path with scoliosis. But let me stop rambling on and I will bring her on. So there she is. Hi, Brenda.
Hi, Christine.
Thank you so much for taking the time. Tell us where are you right now?
I'm in Colorado in the United States.
Lovely. Okay, so I'm in the UK, obviously, so we're always juggling all the different time zones. I can see Haram is already saying hello. Let us know where you are in the world if you are tuning in. Good. And yes, I can address this, Haram. I can address this afterwards, of course. Yes. If I don't know how it works with a live stream, you won't have the subtitles, I think. But I think if you watch it afterwards on the replay, there might be the subtitles as well that you can turn on. So that's all I can say. If you are listening and English is not your first language, you might want to turn them on afterwards. Sorry, Brenda.
No worries. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yes, yeah. So we just had a little chat, obviously beforehand. So you said you've actually been following me here and kind of listening to some of the interviews I've done before. Is that right?
Oh yes, I've been following you on Backchat and some of your other offerings for quite some time. I think being in that yoga teacher scoliosis circle, it's not a huge group of us, so I think
Yeah.
in some ways we connect and find one another.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Even though I feel nowadays, though, at some point, I think when I started my journey, I felt it was only Elise Browning Miller who was
Yeah.
there. And then kind of the deeper you dive, the more you realize how many, and a lot of us obviously trained with her as well.
Yes,
But
I would
yeah.
definitely agree. I thought I was the only person on the planet with a spinal fusion that was trying to get into yoga. Like I knew of
Mm,
no one else. But then since then, I mean, there is a benefit to the technology and the communication
yeah.
when used for good. And positive information. I've been able to connect with people from like you all around the world that have a similar story, so we don't feel alone in our human
Yeah.
journey.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm just going to bring a couple of you guys up here. So Laura is in Argentina. She's in Buenos Aires. And then we've got MC from Atlanta. Is that Georgia? I'm never quite sure with the abbreviations. GA, that's Georgia, isn't it?
Georgia.
Yes. Sorry.
It's all gone.
Good. So, Brenda, do you want to maybe give us a little bit of your background story? What was your scoliosis journey like? When were you first diagnosed, and how did you get into this world of yoga?
Yeah, that's a great long story that I will shorten up, so we're not here for many, many hours. But it's kind of a typical story. I was diagnosed at about 11 years old with like a mild form of scoliosis. My, pediatrician was the one that detected it. There's no history in my family that we know of at all. And they said, well, we'll just keep an eye on it, was kind of the typical protocol then. And then a couple years later, when I was 13, it had progressed significantly, and it was diagnosed with a right thoracic scoliosis. And it was decided, in order to prevent the curve from getting any worse, to be braced. And so I lovingly called it my plastic corset. I was in that for basically all of my teenage years, so from about 13 to about 17.
Wow.
And it was a long time. And in hindsight, I didn't realize the emotional repercussions that had on me until much later. But the inevitable happened. Even after being braced for so many years, the curve still started to progress. I was at about a 55-degree curve at age of 19 when I did have the Harrington rods placed along my spine. So I'm fused in most of my thoracic. So from like a T2 to L1. And the surgery is what it is. I think, for a long time, I held some resentment because it was a long recovery process. I didn't have any pain before then, at least not any physical pain. And so it wasn't until after I got out of surgery that I understood back pain. And although it did subside after like the surgery part healed, and so kind of continued on with life, wasn't really given. Keep in mind, this is like the early 90s. I had my surgery in 1993. So I've had my rods now longer in my back than I have not. So it was, I was young enough to be able to physically heal well. But the sort of mental impressions that were left on me from the experience of being in a very restrictive plastic brace for so many years, because it limited, I was ashamed as a teenager. I didn't want anyone to know because it made me different. I mean, think about it. And I also carried these deep internal messages. And I'm not implying that my surgeons told me this, but as an adolescent, they were saying, well, there's something wrong with your back and we need to fix your back. And but in my adolescent brain, that came out as, there's something wrong with me and I need to fix me. And that was so deeply ingrained, probably on some subconscious level, that the decisions that I made going forward, my perception of life was clouded by this, there's something wrong with me and I need to be fixed. And I know that's a similar story for, many, many people. So we go through life trying to fix.
Yes, I was going to say, I think there's a lot of people who can absolutely relate to this. And I was just listening to some of the Soul Sort lectures. So Soul Sort is the Society of Scoliosis Orthopedic something and rehabilitation. They have a big conference basically once a year, and all the very clever people who deal with scoliosis treatments, they come together, and there's still so much talk about deformity, about all the the cob angles, and at which angle you need to do this, you need to do that. But basically, from you said it so beautifully, from a person who's just growing up, all that you hear is basically all these, well, deformity, definitely terrible word, but all the things that are wrong, basically. And it's very hard to not to take this personally, right?
Right. I definitely took it personally. And being a rather highly empathic person, although I didn't know that at the time, I could just feel the 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 friction of what the doctors were telling me, and they were just doing their job. I'm not like pointing fingers by any means,
No.
but they also didn't realize that growing into adolescence into a young adult is that we take in so much. And yes, what they were saying was medically correct. But as I was receiving it, it was really forming a belief system in my mind that I think really prevented me from looking at myself beyond the diagnosis label. I could just tell you this was my scoliosis pattern, this was my degree of curvature, it got worse. So I knew all those things, but how those were affecting me in an emotional way, and how I made decisions in my daily life was of huge significance that I didn't really realize until later.
Yes, absolutely. So you were 19 when you, and this is kind of, I mean, I find this quite amazing because you had kind of the worst of both worlds, right? You had the brace for a long time, probably much longer than kids nowadays would have them. And then, well, you were probably hoping that that's it
I
then when you
was.
got
In
out of
fact,
the
I was
brace.
told that this is gonna be it, this is gonna take care of it. And then when
Mm.
I stopped growing, the idea was the curve would stop, but that didn't happen.
Okay. So they were then worried that it would just kind of continue to get worse, and then they decided to do the surgery.
Yes. And, I was young enough to be physically well enough to recover
Hmm.
from that surgery, but then had this whole exploration of pain. Like, I had really not had any, I mean, other than feeling restricted in a brace, which that led to breathing issues and digestive issues, but I really hadn't had any significant back pain.
Hmm.
And it did get better before it got worse. And so fast forward about 3, 4 years after my surgery, I started getting in pain in the areas where the rods were not. So it was affecting my
Okay.
lower back and my neck, and it was compensating. I was actually getting hypermobility to compensate for having no spinal flexion and very limited rotation in my thoracic spine. And I mean, I was a pretty active person, and my activity level went way down after surgery. I wasn't given any kind of like post surgery. Again, this is early 90s. I
Hmm.
wasn't really given a whole lot of post surgery exercises or anything to do. I think they gave me like a sheet of paper with like 5 exercise on it, and they said, go home and do this. And of course, at 19, like, no one's going to do that. So I tried to live my life as usual, and then started noticing, oh my gosh, I'm getting pain in my neck, I'm getting pain in my low back. And even like walking around the block was aggravating to my spine. And so my mom, God love her, she said, well, I'm taking this yoga class. And it was through the Park District. This is probably about mid late 90s at this point. She's like, it could be helpful. Why don't you give it a try? And it's very gentle. And at that point, I thought, what have I got to lose? And so I went with her to this class. And this is important because I tell my yoga students this all the time, because many people go into a yoga class and they're like, oh my gosh, my life changed for the better ever since then. And like, I don't know, rainbows, unicorns, all the things. I got out of that first class and went, I don't think I could ever do this again. Like, not only was I just bored, but I had to really face being in my body.
Hmm.
And that was probably not something I had experienced since before being braced. And this is the aspect of that mental emotional journey that so intertwines with the physical that I think is so important for people. Like when there is pain, or if someone's been braced, in order to survive through that emotional trauma, and I'm not trying to glorify it by any means, but to understand like being restricted and not being able to breathe as well, or having to put up with pain, we have to kind of check out of our bodies to just to get
Mm,
through the day. And I hadn't realized that this was my normal day-to-day pattern being checked out.
mm. Do you think that this is more of a result of the brace, or I mean, it's probably difficult for you to kind of differentiate this, but
I think it's
um,
probably just a combination of both.
mhm,
I think it was from early on feeling restricted in the brace, and then having the surgery and experiencing back pain for the first time, and then it subsides, and then it comes back in areas where the rods are not. Just trying to cope with that, we naturally, sort of shut down to be able to cope with what we can for that day. And so
mm,
what the yoga class brought up for me, that first one, even though at the time I just thought, I don't like this, I don't think I'll ever do this again. It was bringing this awareness of, you now have a new body. Like, I
mm,
had to learn how to figure out what I can do, even with the rods. Even though I was always being told, well, don't do this and don't do that. And I got all the don't list, I got that. But I also needed to be able to live in this world and to move, because
yeah.
we're designed as humans to move. So what could I do that felt really good and connect me back to my own body?
Mm. So did you have kind of when you went to that particular yoga class, did you kind of go in and say to your teacher, by the way, I've got a fusion, or I've got a metal piece of metal in my spine, or did you just keep it quiet?
I think I just kept it quiet, because I remember being in the way back. I mean, it wasn't a big room, but I didn't, I was still ashamed, I think,
Hmm.
because I was different. And so I just kind of hung out in the back and thought, well, I will try and do what I can. It was a gentle class to begin. I mean, I remember the instructor. Now, mind you, I'm in my 20s at the time. She looked like she was like 100 years old. She was probably only 60. So it tended to be an older person class, which is actually what I needed. I didn't know that at the time. But the
Yeah.
slow pace of that class also made me realize, because we would hold these stretches for a while, and then I would start to notice my mind. And that was another key piece. I started to notice this mental chatter constantly, and they weren't always the most kind thoughts. And it was this constant either future planning, like, oh, I have to do this when I get out of here, or it's like, why can't you do this? Why can't you be like that person next to you? Maybe you shouldn't even be here. Like, this constant chatter. And so that was also being brought up in that class. So of course I left going, I don't know if I can handle this. Like,
Mm.
being in a new body, quote unquote, and then also really starting to pay attention to the fluctuations of my thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to bring up a comment here from Jess. Is saying, hello, I had rods for 5 years and then got an infection and had them removed. Had a PICC line at home for 5 weeks to administer antibiotics. My curve has progressed slowly since then. Yeah, so
Mm.
it's yeah, it can be quite a journey, obviously, and sometimes I think I sometimes kind of just listen to those to some conversations, listen in the Facebook groups, in other Facebook groups where people talk about surgery mainly, and a lot of them who are pre-surgery kind of, or mums or families, think like that's it, right? You have your surgery and then that's it. But what I hear from you and anyone else, obviously, who's had spinal fusion, and certainly from Jess here, it's just the beginning, right? So
Mhm.
you had to kind of completely relearn, obviously, how your body works.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering, did you kind of, so you had a little bit of guidance of what you should do and what you shouldn't do, or what you can do, what you can't do?
Well, I definitely had the should nots from my doctors.
Yeah.
They made that, very clear. In terms of the what I could do, that was kind of an exploration. Keep in mind, this is a different time. Back in the 90s, we didn't have all the resources like yours to really kind of have more guidance. So for me, it was like, well, here's how I can move laterally, and here's my limited now rotation. And so it became a sort of progression of being very sensitive to, oh, this is my limit on this one side. And then, oh, here's the other limit on the other side, because it was different. We're working with asymmetry. And so really listening into my body, and then also noticing when the thoughts came up, when the judgmental thoughts came up as well, because they were very intertwined. And I know that can feel very overwhelming. But this is when breath work comes in. And I think this is such a key piece in yoga that we don't necessarily, because I did quite a bit later on. I did, physical therapy and more static kind of stretching, but breath work was never really addressed. And first of all, I had learned actually from that first yoga class that I was a reverse breather, and I had no idea. So what that means is, like, usually when we inhale, our belly fills up like a balloon. And then when we exhale, it deflates like a balloon. And somewhere along the way, I had learned to do the exact opposite. So when I was inhaling, my belly sucked
Everything
in and it went
was
all
okay.
up into my chest. And then opposite, when I exhaled, my belly filled out. And I had no idea. And that's such a small trigger to that fight or flight nervous system that I was carrying with me for who knows how many years. So I was learning, I'm like, I've got to learn how to breathe the correct way. So to calm my nervous system down, because that was also affecting the anxiousness of my thoughts. So breath work was huge for me to breathe and then create space in the body from the inside out. So doing those stretches and then breathing into that space and then exhaling, just releasing the tension. And that alone was the kind of the first seed that was planted in, breathing properly and starting to explore how I could move my body now, even with the rods.
So so kind of coming back to this, so you didn't really enjoy the first experience of yoga, but maybe mainly because it kind of it touched on the trauma, I guess,
Yes.
that you had experienced. But what was it then that made you come back eventually, and eventually train to be a yoga teacher, of course?
It's true. And I say it wasn't like it just in a few classes. I would say over the first year or almost 2 years, I had this like love-hate relationship where I'd be like, yes, I know I can do this. And then the trauma would come up and another layer of it would come up. And then I'd pull back and be like, oh, I don't know if I can, take this on again. And so it was this kind of start, stop, start, stop. And then eventually, and there wasn't like one pinpoint, I started to realize that I actually felt worse when I wasn't doing the yoga. And I was like, okay, I think this is something I need to consistently do to have the results that I want to feel better in my body. I wasn't so reactive in my mind. It wasn't great, but it was slow progress. And so eventually it did become a short but regular practice, week after week, month after month. And I did notice that as my body was becoming as flexible as it could be, as I was focusing on what I could do in my body as opposed to what I could not do, and not overextending my limits, it expanded my world. Like I started looking into, other activities that I could do. Like I got into hiking. I got into rock climbing, which if you would have told me that I would be interested in that right after surgery, I'd be like, oh gosh, no. But I was starting to build strength in my body and strength in my mind. Like I started to realize, I'm not all those thoughts going in and out of my mind telling me that I'm not enough. And so those original belief systems of I need to be fixed, and I'm not enough and I need to do something to fix me started to go into the periphery or into the background. And I was beginning to focus on my deeper breathing, which created space in my body, the physical forms, the postures I could do. And then I did start a meditation practice, which I know a lot of people go, oh, meditation, oh my gosh, I can't just sit there and do nothing. And I was definitely one of those people. I'm like, oh, I'm too active. There's no way I could go and listen to all my thoughts. But I just started to do things more mindfully. And
Mm,
so when the thought did come up, I was like, like, do I want to believe that thought? Is that really who I am? And decide, well, I can either hold on to that thought if it's serving me, or I can choose on my exhale to release that and bring in something that I do want to create in my life.
mm. Very nice. So, um, tell us about the Reiki a little bit more, because well, I called this chat obviously energy healing and holistic lifestyle, and I love how you kind of created this. You painted us the picture obviously, and I love your journey and how it um, kind of went from the physical to maybe the little bit more subtle things afterwards. That's what it sounds like to me. And I don't know very much about Reiki, I have to say. I know that I do have a student in my yoga class who is a Reiki master, and she does a lot of this. So that's all I know really about Reiki. So tell us, for anyone who's like me and he maybe doesn't know much about it, yeah, what is it all about?
So I'll clarify a little bit energy healing and Reiki, because I feel
Mm-hmm.
like as energy healing, we hear this term more in mainstream, and then we hear Reiki associated with energy healing. And I think the vocabulary, depending on the person you talk to, is different, but the concepts are the same. So I
Okay.
think that's where, at least where I'm seeing people get confused. Like, this person talks about Reiki, but then this person talks about energy healing or energy medicine. It's coming up in different forms. And I think people are just naturally curious about it. And I think that's because there are some similar stories to mine, like where we did the physical work, like we did the yoga postures and we did the breathing, and we're still having some pain, or we're still dealing with some of the mental and emotional issues that have not been resolved from like typical Western medicine treatments. And so people are now naturally curious, like, where do those belief systems come from? Like, how come my perspective looks at my body or my mind in this way? And so, just to back it up a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
I say that everything is energy. Like, our physical body's movement is energy. We are connected by energy. Our thoughts, our feelings are some of the most powerful energy that we can choose. And then you get into this, what is might return to, you mentioned subtle body. So it's this idea that we are not just, we don't end right at our skin. There is this extension of us and who we are. And some people can feel that, whether you call it energetic field or aura. There's different terms. Again, this gets into vocabulary where people are like,
Mm-hmm.
it's all the same idea, but it's this acknowledgement that, I am not just a physical body. I am not just my chattery thoughts. There is an energy. That's why my heart beats and I don't have to control it. That's why I breathe and I don't have to tell myself, okay, now you need to inhale. I mean, unless we're trying to deepen it or something. These are
Mm-hmm.
just natural energetic systems. We're connected to our outside world, the natural world outside of us, all living beings. And so when we become aware of this greater sense, and there's different terms for this, and this is again where it can be a little tricky. So Reiki, broken down, is basically a connection to, whether you want to call it our highest self, our, capital C, consciousness, spirit, God. It can be referred to as many things, but it's this universal life force that we are all connected to. And it's not that we can't access this, but because sometimes our attention is drawn away to external things, including our physical body or someone else, we have lost, many people have lost this connection to this universal life force.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's a lot of criticism in here that says, well, you can't see it. And how do you know if it's working? And I'm like, well, like we take for granted that our heart is going to beat. We take for granted that, we are going to move and breathe in this world. So there is an amount of faith and trust in this process. But we all have this ability to tune inward.
Mm-hmm.
And so Reiki is this awareness or ability to draw in that universal life force energy. And it's a healing energy. It comes from light and love. You hear the term for the greatest good. And this is where I started to shift, when I started to focus in on there is an energy that is much greater than what my rational mind can come up with. Because, and I think people can relate to this, I was trying so hard to do the right things, like all the right yoga postures and all the right advice that I was given from other people, that I was sending my power or my energy out instead of really listening within. And so for me, my Reiki teachers, it was this key piece. And this was after I had been through yoga teacher training. And had really invested time and energy into learning the yoga postures and learning the best way for me to meditate, but expanding even more and being like, what does my own inner healer say that I need? Instead of always looking at the person outside of myself, which they can give me some really good advice that I may need, but can I filter that within my own self and decide, is this the best decision for me? And can I be within that, what we call sacred space? And we get to create that for ourselves.
Now that takes a lot of work, I imagine, and a lot of trust and a lot of courage, really, because I mean, I sometimes see this in myself as a kind of a little trap, because your first, or my first instinct sometimes, if I don't know what to do, is to ask someone else, right? We always kind of look for this, well, somebody else will tell me what is the best thing for me. A doctor will know, right? I just need to find the right person, and they are the expert who's going to give me all the answers. But I can absolutely relate to this. I think you can get into this at some point. I think you just realize that it's always something outside that you're trying to um, get, but really, if you're really honest with yourself, it is somewhere inside of you, isn't it? But it's so difficult, isn't it?
It is, because we are constantly distracted outside of ourselves, and even more so now in the last couple of years. But the tools that Reiki gave me in terms of trusting this universal life force, and that I can, whether you call it channel or receive it in, it's part of learning to be a receiver and allowing in this energy that I give it an intention to, a healing intention that comes from love and light. Instead of splaying out my energy in all different directions, trying to figure out, well, should I do this? This person said I should do this, and really bringing it in. It is deep inner work, but I will say it is so worth it, because I look at my journey, and by any Western medicine standards, by the things that I have gone through, both physically, mentally, and emotionally, I live a life that is vibrant and full. And I attribute that to that inner work that I've done. It didn't come from someone else solely. I mean, of course, I have relied on different health practitioners to help me in my journey, but ultimately, my inspiration and my willingness to even put myself out there on this show, like, I don't know if I would have even done that a few years ago. I've been like, oh no one's going to want to listen to me. But as I've stepped into my worthiness and sort of brought that, instead of giving away my power, like I said, and then drawing that power in, knowing, no, this is my own integrity. And this is what I get to share with the world. I tell people, although I would never want to repeat a spinal fusion surgery, my spine and those experiences are one of my greatest teachers. besides my daughters. My daughters are also very good teachers for me. But I don't think I would have learned resiliency or empathy or compassion for other people, probably not any other way. And I think those gifts are even greater than the pain that I did go through.
Yes, and just knowing that you are, just by sharing your story, you are helping so many people. There's so many people who are at home and maybe in this situation that you were, whatever, 10, 15 years ago, and feeling hopeless, feeling like they're not enough, feeling like they need to be fixed, and what can I do, and looking for all this outside help. So I think it's so important, and that's why I always ask people to share their story, because so many people will find so much comfort in what, obviously, what you're having to say, and the things that you went through, right?
Right. And I still have times where I do have physical pain. It's not like,
Hmm.
oh, that
No.
was it. It's all done. But I feel now I have the tools that I need,
Hmm.
tools from yoga, a mindfulness practice with meditation, different energy healing techniques, some of them from Reiki, some of them from more modern sources. Some of them actually derive from like traditional Chinese medicine. I'm not an acupuncturist, but I've learned about meridian lines and acupressure points. So there are different ancient systems of energetic anatomy that we can really tap into.
Mm.
Emotional freedom technique is kind of an offshoot of using different acupressure points to help release some of the negative, stagnant old habits that we hold on to. There are different tools that we can bring in that complete this holistic style of learning. It's not just about the physical body, and not even just about the mental mind. It's an even broader, bigger picture. And I think that's where whatever energy healing modality a person uses, whether it is the Japanese tradition of Reiki or traditional Chinese medicine, or there are more modern forms of energy medicine techniques that are now out there that are like readily available, that can help us tap into our, whether you call it intuition, our true self, but it allows us to like bring back our own power and inspire a life that we want to live. And so we're
Mm.
taken out of this victim mode, like, oh, this is happening to me. I went through that for more years than I care to consider. But to turn that around and being like, look what I learned from my experiences. Like, look how I have grown in depth of character. And it's made me like who I really am. And then I get to gift that to other people by sharing my story. And when the pain does arise, because it does, and I'll notice my thoughts go back into this pattern of, oh, I need to be fixed. Oh, I need to find something just outside of myself to fix me. At least now I'm able to kind of catch myself a little bit sooner than I would have, and to put into place the practices that I know I need to do to take care of myself.
Mm. So do you think that the Western medicine that uh, is a little bit kind of two-dimensional, or I don't know how you would maybe describe. Do you feel like there is a big part missing, or do you feel like it's slowly kind of evolving, and maybe considering some of these other alternative?
I think it's just,
Um,
it depends on who you talk to. I would like to think
mhm.
that it is evolving, because I've had many students with scoliosis that would say, oh, my doctor said that yoga would be helpful for me. And I'm like, yes, but then, I mean, doctors are trained in what they are trained to do, and we need
Yeah.
that perspective. I'm not
Mhm.
trying to pass that over. I would just add, and there is a whole other journey that healing brings on the mental and emotional side, on our energetic side, like how we view ourselves in this world is so important, and how we heal that.
Mm.
And there's so many different modalities now that we can be in touch with. Yeah, it looks like qigong and tai chi and all of those like more Chinese traditions, those are great. And so I would definitely encourage someone to just, try something that piques your interest, even if it might seem a little out there. And obviously do what your body feels capable of doing. And just know that at first it might not feel great, like my first yoga class, but it's just because it was new. And sometimes change can be difficult, even good change. I mean, our brains love familiar. Our brains want to stay safe, and I totally get that. But it's also very healthy for us to evolve and to hopefully take some of the, whether you want to kind of lessons or opportunities that we get from our struggles. I tell people, like, the people that have most impacted me in my life are people who have been through some very serious struggles and have come out of it, this person of great character and great depth. I mean, you think of like the big people like Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa. These are people that struggled. These are people that had hardships. And so when we view it from that perspective, that I could, heal through this, I have every capability to do that. If I need help, I check in. Is this what I'm really being called to do, or a person to work with? And if not, know that that's okay. And there will be something that does come in that is a good fit. So it is a trusting and a surrendering to this process. Not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but a process that I have so greatly learned from in many, many ways.
Yeah. Just bringing up some more comments here. Never get desperate when pain arises. Never dark thoughts before begin to do things actively. Is that a question, Laura, or is that a? But yeah, I can definitely relate to this, and this whole, when you're in it, when you're in the storm, it might seem like darkness, like Laura was saying, right? That there is no hope, and everything is against you, and you are in this kind of victim mode. But I think, as you say, the more you experience these things, that these are just kind of fluctuations, right? It doesn't stop there, and we do get to evolve.
And I would say, when those shadow times come and we do feel overwhelmed, and we're seeing this so much in mental health awareness coming up after coming out of at least I'm calling it coming out of pandemic times, that we will have a tendency to isolate ourselves. And I would say that's actually the opposite. Even though, yes, I was ashamed, from a very young age of being in a back brace, and my spine was different. I had different mobility issues. Eventually, I learned that I needed to be in a community. I needed to be like, we are just designed to energetically be in community with other people. Like, that's just how we're designed. I mean, that's why, we talk about how we extend outside of just our skin. Like, we connect with other people, sometimes without even words. Sometimes it's just being in a place. And I'm even learning to be in virtual places and being able to connect with people. At first I was really like, I don't know about this. This is kind of strange. But that we are meant to be with people, just to support and encourage us, to hold us accountable. That was also a big piece for me, especially when I started meditation. I had actually a partner that we would kind of hold ourselves accountable and be like, okay, can we do at least 5 minutes of meditation and just sit and breathe? Whether that was a guided meditation, whether that was just listening to the thoughts pass by, to build that self-awareness. And I think that's so powerful, to have someone along, whether it's a partner or a group, where we all know that we're not meant to show up here perfect, totally intact, but that we get to do this journey together, and it unfolds.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I definitely found this with my membership, which I started a couple of years ago, maybe a little bit more now, because there was, you know, I was teaching all the same. People always ask me, what should I do? What are the exercises I should do for my scoliosis? And it kind of always came back to the saying of it's not going to work if you don't actually do it. So
Yes.
there was this missing thing. There was this accountability. What you just mentioned, that sense of community, that was kind of missing, because I could give all the, you know, I think you could try this, you could try that, and you have all those things, but then if you don't do it, it's for sure not going to work. So
Yes.
yeah, I think that sense of community and accountability, and finding a group, right, of like-minded people, of yeah, finding a local yoga class, being with other people, if it's in the virtual space or actually be physically in the room together, is such a powerful thing.
It is. And I think
Mm.
it's crucial, and it's a key piece of healing. And you mentioned the like-minded, because there were a lot of people in my world, but they weren't necessarily in the direction that I wanted to go. And I mean, love them as they are and accept them for who they are. But I also knew that I didn't want to stay in a victim mentality or in a negative mind space. I knew I wanted to move forward. And
Mm.
so aligning with people that, you know, also had that similar interest and growth pattern. I wanted to, you know, make a difference, a small positive impact in this world and in the short time that I'm here.
Mm.
And I do enjoy teaching that.
Mm.
And yeah, as a yoga teacher, and I have, you know, my own blend. It's not specific scoliosis yoga, but it's this blend of using some of the energy healing techniques that I've learned and blending it in with yoga postures. And so
Okay.
it becomes this mix of, and I use energy healing techniques from all the different modalities that I've learned. It's one of, I am forever a student. I love learning different ways. Some of them have worked for me and some of them have not, but have worked for some of my students. So I always just offer them up. Like, here's something that might work for you. I feel like the energy healing piece really works on some of the old belief systems and helping to rewire some of those patterns that we, maybe even on a subconscious level, basically live our life through that belief system. And so whether it's the I need to be fixed mentality, there are ways that we can use uh, the different energetic lines through our bodies called meridians, or the universal life energy force in Reiki, along with moving and breathing. And it connects all those holistic pieces of who we are as a human being in our totality, rather
Mm.
than just focusing on the body. And that for me has been just a game changer, if you will.
Mm, yes. So for anyone who's curious now and would like to learn more, or who would like to work with you, how do you work with people? Is it one-to-one, or do you work online? Do you have any training?
I do. I do have some online trainings. I also do work one-on-one with people here in Colorado, but I am shifting more to an online platform. I have on my website, which is sacredpathyogaandreiki.com. I have an energy healing yoga series. It's a recorded series from a previous series that I did. You can, if you find on my website, you can get the first class for free just to check it out, because I realize it's something a little outside the box,
Yeah.
but very accessible to all different levels of yoga and experiences with energy healing. It just brings in this new concept or component that maybe someone hasn't considered yet. And I would say, especially if you're like, okay, I'm doing the yoga postures, but there's still more. I feel like there's just still more that needs some completion or wholeness in my journey. And so that may offer them the next key piece. And then I offer a holistic lifestyle training that is based on 3 seasons. So I am very connected with the natural seasons of our lifestyle. And that also includes issues like nutrition, which is also a key component as well, because I've had digestive issues along with the scoliosis issues. So nutrition and energy healing, mindfulness, all those things that just raise our vibration and raise our energy and what we do want to create in this world.
Well, you've definitely made me curious. I will definitely check out some of those practices and have a look on your website. And I have put it into the description as well for anyone who is curious and who
Yes.
wants to
And
find out more.
I do have it's a short holistic scoliosis program. It's a recorded series that is specific for scoliosis. The energy healing yoga is really for anyone who's just curious.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much, Brenda. This has been, it's been amazing, and I really enjoyed our conversation. Any kind of last pieces of advice for anyone who is maybe in that space of darkness and has maybe just either been diagnosed with scoliosis or been told they need to have surgery? Anything that you can offer right now?
I think one of the things I do every morning is I put a hand on my heart and connect in with my own heart beating. And this is my reminder that I am a miracle. And that I do not need to be fixed. So my mantra in the mornings are, I am enough, I am whole. And then it ends with a question. And I sort of address it to whether you want to call it universe, God, spirit, whatever you want to call it, is what do I need to know today? It's just that, what do I need to know today? And it's so beautiful how just simple messages of I am enough, I am whole just as I am, come in. And for people to really know that deep within, place a hand on your heart, feel your heart beating. That is that perfect energetic rhythm that's designed just for you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Brenda. And there's lots of thank yous coming in here in the chat. And sorry, I haven't gone through all your comments, but yes, Brenda will get the chance to read them all afterwards, obviously.
Thank you to everyone who's listening. It's really been my honor. It's a gift for me to share. It's a gift for me to share my story in hopes that if it helps people and know that you're not alone.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. All right, stay on a little bit longer, Brenda, while I'll say goodbye to everyone, obviously. So thank you so much, guys, for watching on replay or live with us right now, obviously. Feel free to share this with anyone who you think might need to hear these amazing words from Brenda, obviously, today. And we'll see you next week again. So it's 4 p.m. UK time, different times, different parts of the world, of course. And yeah, thank you guys.